You've probably seen that Prime Minister Starmer has discovered his butch side and has come out against immigration. He's getting all manly about it. What I'd like to talk about here is why I don't believe it. I don't think he means it. And even if he did, I don't think he can do it. I don't think we're going to see particularly big drops in mass immigration. I think we probably will see a small drop initially. I can see it going back up again, perhaps another small drop before the next election. But I don't think it's going to happen the way he says. What I want to do is to look first at those plans. Right, so that's Labour's immigration plans at a glance. When you dig in, there isn't really a lot of meat there at all. What's remarkable is how trivial it is. So if I look here, I'll go through one heading at a time. I'm using the BBC. The BBC are part of the enemy, so at least I can't be accused of exaggerating. So work visas are tightened for some. Overseas workers will now generally need a degree level qualification. What this means is that the higher threshold will not apply to those already in the UK, but ministers say it will prevent new visa applications for around 180 jobs, reducing immigration by about 39,000 a year by 2029. So over the next 4 years, it's going to, the reduction every year will be 3% of the 1.3 million that came in 2023. I think the next year it was slightly under 1 million, or maybe 1.1 million that the total number coming in. The net number was a bit over 900,000 and then a bit over 700,000 for those 2 years. So what you're looking at, a decline of 39,000, that's 3 to 4% of the gross number. That's trivial. All right, so visa requirements are then loosened for others. At the same time, the government wants to expand eligibility for its dedicated work visas for graduates of elite universities outside the UK. So what they're going to do, they're going to double the number of universities that count as elite universities. So they want to expand that scheme. I doubt that that's going to have increased the numbers by all that much. It might, maybe by about 10,000 a year, possibly. I don't think they're going to attract the cream of the crop. Then, thirdly, longer residency waits. Now, this one, I think, gives us a window into what they're trying to achieve. Immigrants will typically have to live in the UK for 10 years before applying for the right to stay indefinitely. What that means is, if you come to the UK on a work visa or on a study visa, normally you will have stamped on your visa no recourse to public funds. What that means is you can't claim dole, you can't get social housing, you can't get monetary benefits. I think you can still go to the NHS and get your COVID shot and get your penicillin, but you can't claim welfare. And then after you've been in the UK for 5 years, you can then apply for indefinite leave to remain, and if you get that, you then can get welfare. So what is not rare is for migrants to come, they work in the economy, they support themselves, they live with relatives. After they've been here for 5 years, then they go on the welfare gravy train. And what the government is saying here is that they're going to double that period from 5 years to 10 years. So I don't think that's going to affect numbers, because I think there is every reason for people who want to come to this country for just to work, for reasons other than welfare. I think people do. I think there are plenty of welfare migrants, but I think when GDP per head is 30, 50 or 70 times higher than it is in places like Pakistan, India, Somalia or Afghanistan, then I think people will come here. It's like the golden ticket just to get here, to be able to work, even if you have no access to welfare. So I don't think that's likely to affect numbers. What I think that's about is making immigration more profitable. So you extend the period where if someone comes over on a work visa, they work, they pay taxes, they can't get welfare that makes it more profitable for them. What you're doing is you're printing a plug-and-play worker who comes into the economy. You haven't had to spend any money on educating or training the person. He just gets a job and then works. And if he's not able to receive welfare, that's even more profitable. So they want to double that profitable period. And I think really what this is about, these changes, they're not about reducing numbers. They're about the government saying we want to control immigration. That's the word they're using. We want to control it, and they want to control it in order to make it more profitable. Now the problem with that is when something becomes more profitable, you get to rely on it more. You want more of it. You want to expand it. A little bit like, I think it's like drug addiction. And I think this is a constant comparison that occurs to me. And it's a bit like going to a drug addict and say, we will double the purity of your heroin supply. And what we think that will mean is you'll inject yourself less often. But it won't. The drug addict will say, actually, I like this pure heroin. I'm going to start taking more of it and injecting more and more of it because it's so nice. I think that's what's going to happen here. I think this is about making mass immigration profitable. I think it really comes down to the economic imperative to keep the headline GDP figure stable when it's in decline. Okay, care visas are scrapped. Care visas, that's people coming over from Zimbabwe to work in a care home. That, according to Google, that it was 27 or 29,000 per year on health and care visas. Now, assuming none of those people are NHS workers, NHS nurses, that it's all people going into work in care homes, that is not a very big that's not a very big drop in immigration numbers. So you've had about 3 or 4% on tightening up visas, and now you have about another 2 to 3% on getting rid of the care visa. So that's about between 5 and 7%. Again, that is not significant. That's not quite a rounding error, but it can easily get soaked up by noise on the curve, the fluctuations in numbers coming in every year. That's not significant. And there, that just shows net migration. I wish they didn't use net migration because it doesn't show total numbers coming in. It doesn't show the breakdown of the composition of the UK. But so in 2023, it was a bit over, net was about, I think, 930,000. And 2024, I think it got down to about 730. So still huge numbers. That's the overall numbers. So the numbers that they're talking about here, the reductions they're talking about, are trivial. Stricter student rules. Again, this is nothing. Overseas students will only be able to stay in the UK for 18 months after their studies instead of 2 years currently. I suspect what that is just tightening up the period where someone comes over on some rubbish course, some make-believe course, studies some course just to be over here, and they're working on the black economy, they're working as a waiter, they're working in a halal abattoir, and then by reducing it by 6 months, you're basically saying, hurry up and apply for a proper job whilst you're here. If you don't get a proper job, you've got to go. We want you in the proper economy paying tax. I think that's what they're saying. Again, I think it's about making immigration a bit more profitable sooner, but that's nothing. It's just reducing it from 2 years to 18 months. That's nothing. The next one is a refugee pilot is extended. That's people who don't qualify as refugees under British law, but the UN recognises them as refugees. They have a way to come to Britain to work. It talked about apparently the number that's mentioned there is 100 skilled workers. So if that's 100 people, if that really is the case, then again, that's tiny. That doesn't make any difference. It's not a big rise. And then tougher English tests. That's pure politics. That's theatre. People, they know people are irritated with people coming over who won't speak English. I don't care if a Pakistani, Afghan or Somali migrant can speak better English. He isn't English. I don't want him here. I just don't want them here. They're not us. We're entitled to our homeland. And what I think you'll get is a profession of people who train you up to be able to speak, to say the sentences that they test you on at those English tests. And also I think you'll get a market in people who sit the test for you. I doubt they'll do DNA tests on the person as they come in to take the test. I can't see that. Then skills and training. The government says what it's going to do, it's going to, well, the government says firms in sectors deemed to rely too much on overseas workers will be expected to comply with strategies to boost workplace skills. What I've read that's about is saying if you want to bring in an overseas worker, you first have to show that you haven't been able to recruit someone in the UK, that you've tried and you failed. I used to do that kind of thing all day with planning applications, particularly applications where you were converting commercial premises into residential years ago, and you do a fake marketing, we do a marketing exercise, and there are no takers, you get no serious offers, and then you say, well, there's we've tried now we want to convert it. And that's what will happen here. You will get a market for people conducting fake recruitment processes so that they can get someone cheap from abroad. Then family rights will be reviewed. The government says it will table legislation to clarify how the right to a family life in European human rights law should apply to immigration cases. Okay, so that's a clarification. We don't know what that means. Is it going to tighten it up very much? I don't think Starmer's going to do that. I just don't think it's in his nature. It's not in his blood. And finally, no overall cap. Of course there isn't. They're not going to give a number. I think because I don't think they intend to increase the numbers very much or at all. Okay, just to give you an idea of the numbers we're talking about, the gross numbers, in 2023 it was about, this is from a BBC report, you're looking at about 1.3, slightly over 1.3 million came in, and that was about 920, 930 net. But the gross number of foreigners coming in, overwhelmingly non-EU people, third worlders, and then that went down. It looks like it went down to about just a bit under 1.2 million in 2024. So compared against those numbers, 29,000 here, 39,000 there, that's nothing. All right, does Starmer mean it? Well, let's look at what he has said in the past. I think Starmer's self-image is of the passionate, committed human rights lawyer. He loves it. Human rights lawyer means an immigration lawyer. That's 95% of what you do as a human rights lawyer is about immigration. But I think he's stupid and he's vain. And I think he likes the idea of being a very rich, very high status, famous lawyer who also has a reputation for passionate goodness and the defense of the poor victim immigrant. That's what he likes. He gets both the best of both worlds: material success and also a reputation for being extremely compassionate. And I think that's what he fantasizes about. That's the self-image he wants. That's the self-image he craves. I think he said, I think as a young lawyer, he wrote a paper saying that racism was, or the immigration system was shot through with racism. That's how he feels about it. And I think that's his real attitude. So, but let's see what he has said as a politician. Now, he's changed his tune on immigration. This lists a bunch of ways. Firstly, in 2015, he challenged the Tory deportation plan. So in his maiden speech, that's his first speech in Parliament, he said that, or he opposed the Tory government's plan to create a British Bill of Rights that would supersede the European human rights legislation. And what they wanted to do is to restore common sense to the application of human rights law in the UK, making the Supreme Court the ultimate arbiter on the issue. And he was against it. And his reasoning, it was just stupid. What he said is, as we now celebrate the 800th anniversary of Magna Carta, let us affirm the principle that human rights apply to everyone equally. So basically he's saying Magna Carta means that we should be governed by European rules on immigration. Total non sequitur. He's a bit of a dunce, really. So any proposed Bill of Rights, British Bill of Rights, inconsistent with that principle, will not be worth the paper it is written on, etc. So again, posing as the passionate human rights lawyer. Then in January 2020, he demands free movement with the EU after Brexit. Now he made some quite sweeping statements here that it's impossible to imagine he's completely gone back on those. We welcome migrants. We don't scapegoat them. Low wages, poor housing, poor public services are not the fault of people who come here. They're political failure. What he means is government should be giving money to people, providing wealth to everyone, because government wealth is unlimited. So we have to make the case for the benefits of migration, for the benefits of free movement. So we need to make the case. So he wants to advocate for the benefits of migration. I think that's his real point of view. I just don't think he's changed that. And then later on, he called for full voting rights for EU nationals. I don't know, it might seem a trivial measure, but why is he asking for that? It's as if he feels that his sense of virtue and his sense of self-image involves chipping away at the autonomy and independence of the UK at every opportunity. I don't understand that. So he called for full voting rights for EU nationals, and he said, we want an immigration system based on compassion and dignity, end indefinite detention, and call for the closure of centres such as Yarl's Wood. So he's, again, that's consistent with what I think is his real self-image. I think he's a vain man. And then around the same time, he went into full gear, really quite strong words, to prevent a bunch of Jamaican criminals. I've read that it was about 50 getting loaded onto a plane and flown back to Jamaica. Most of them, because of legal intervention, were dragged off the plane, and he supported that. He said they shouldn't be sent back. Eventually 17 were sent back, and they were found to have committed really serious crimes. Those on board had been convicted of crimes including rape, robbery, grievous bodily harm, and drug offences. So that's the kind of person he wanted to remain in this country. So when he says we don't want an island of strangers, we want community between everyone, queer, I don't believe a word of that. And all of this is, by the way, it's against what he's calling for now, which is he wants to curb judges' ability to prevent deportations. He was passionate about judges' ability to prevent deportations before. So, and then in 2022, at the same time as Boris Johnson was doing it, just at the time of the Boris wave, he was calling for a points-based immigration system. A points-based immigration system, as far as I'm aware, in Australia and here, has only ever been used in order to increase immigration. That's the kind of, it's a two-faced pretense that's used to justify, to launder, to sanitize mass immigration. But now, what he's saying is we're going to bring immigration down significantly. So he promised to reduce the number of migrants coming to the UK significantly. The remarks will be bookmarks. In Whitehall, he said, make no mistake, the plan means migration will fall. That is a promise. Now, I think he sees immigration and migration as different things. I think he probably thinks immigration good if it's controlled, migration meaning people just wandering into this country because they feel like it and they can, that's bad. I think that's what he means. But the bottom line is this is completely inconsistent with everything he has said ever since he's been in Parliament. Certainly everything he said for the last decade, and everything he said when he was a lawyer and before that. He just loves the idea of being the passionate do-gooder. Okay, let's analyse his words, what he's saying today. I think this is significant. This is a tweet that he came out with after his announcement, and this is the Keir Starmer Twitter page. I know you're angry about immigration. I get it. Now that first thing, the way to spot a liar is to, hold on, let me get rid of it. The way to spot a liar is to pay close attention to their words, the way they don't quite address meaning, the way they sidestep the question you've asked them, and the way they don't answer, and the way they try to appear to answer without answering, and the way they use things like false intensifiers, which he uses here, say, I really, really, really mean it. He uses that kind of language here. And I think if you pay attention to this language, you'll see what he's getting at. I know you're angry about immigration, I get it. So he's not saying he doesn't want to see immigration. He's saying, you're angry about it, I don't want you to be angry at me, I want you to know that I get it. So please stop being angry at me, don't direct your anger at me. That's really what he's saying. I want to dodge your anger about immigration. Mark my words, and that's the false intensifier. That people use that when they're lying. When someone uses a false intensifier, the thing they say afterwards is actually something they don't mean. It's kind of the way people use the word obviously or totally and utterly, that kind of word. It means they've got nothing to say or they don't mean it. Bullies use mark my words, mark my words. I will take back control of our borders. Again, that's the point. He's not saying mark my words, I am going to slash immigration. He's saying I'm going to control the borders. It will be controlled immigration. So the analogy I would draw is if I go out in the garden with my hose pipe, that is not controlled. The dribble of water coming out of the hose pipe, that's not controlled. Half of it ends up down my wellies. If the fireman goes out with his great big fire hose that bursts out, I don't know, 10 gallons a second, that or more, that is very controlled, that flow of water. So that's what I'm making. I think he's saying there may be a lot of immigration, but it will be controlled. And that's really the point that he's setting us up for. I think he's going to trick us. I think this is a trick. That means cutting migration. Now, he's using the word immigration and migration. I get the feeling he sees those as different things. I think he thinks immigration is good as long as it's controlled, as long as people are filtered for being profitable immigrants. I think he sees migration as the sort of thing, people just wandering and sifting around the planet and coming here just because it feels better, even if they're not bringing any benefit to us. And so I think he thinks controlled immigration good, migration bad. So that means cutting migration. I think he will cut. I can see him applying stricter tests, but there'll still be millions and millions of people who want to come here who qualify under those stricter tests. Then ending the use of asylum hotels. That's a cosmetic measure. That doesn't affect numbers. If they don't live in hotels, they'll live in hostels, bed and breakfast accommodation, or private houses probably. And ramping up our efforts to stop the small boat crossings. So not stopping the small boat crossings, that would have been simpler to say, but ramping up our efforts. So he's saying we want to know that at least he's trying, at least he's on our side. That's what he's trying to say. This is misdirection. And that we will smash the people smuggling gangs at source. Yeah, he might well do that. He might well smash quite a lot of those gangs, but there are more gangs on the coast of northern France than there is coast on the north of France to accommodate them. So that's why they have gunfights. Those gangs have gunfights because they're fighting over turf and territory, over pitches on the beach. So if you take out some of those gangs, you just get other gangs will just take their place, or will just operate more freely. And if you got rid of, say one day you managed to smash every single gang that was operating, that £250 million per year business would quickly suck in a lot of other operators. Instantly, I've done a video about this. You can't, they're very difficult to prosecute because they tend to be small single cell operations running down to the beach. You'll get the people who drive the van or open the van or pump up the dinghy. You don't get Mr. Big who's back in Syria or Iraq or maybe Turkey. So this is all language to avoid saying he's going to cut the numbers. And I think it's carefully chosen. It reveals that he's a liar. It reveals that he doesn't mean what he says here. But now what I want to deal with is why, assuming he is sincere, I don't think the government will be able to cut immigration by very much for economic reasons. I think that we are just too dependent on it as a kind of a sugar rush, a drug, a methamphetamine hit every year into the economy by basically printing plug and play workers into the economy. And I don't think they have much, I don't think they have any choice there actually if they want to stay in power and not get defenestrated, which I think it's safe to assume that's what they want. So don't get me wrong, I think that mass immigration started for political and not economic reasons. I think it really got going because it was found to be, and because it is, a really good way to make us easier to rule and more manageable. It grinds us down, it dilutes our wages, it makes us poorer, it increases the cost of life, it increases prices that we have to pay, it keeps prices up, so it makes life tougher for us. It makes just increases competition for employment. It subjects us to crime. It puts much greater pressure on public services that a lot of people need. It sows mistrust between everyone, and it takes away our identity, which incidentally increases the power of politicians by making them the source of British identity. Because I've got nothing in common with most of these immigrants, and they've nothing in common with me, that they don't want it. And if that's the case, the only thing we have in common is, if there's some overarching nationality, it is the people who rule us. That's a horrible thought, but Keir Starmer and the members of Parliament represent what it means to be British. If you look at the film of Parliament, I think it's pretty clear that that's what they think as well. So I think it started because of the will to power. Politicians wanted to increase their power over us by making us less powerful, more dependent, easier to manage. But I think, as with all amoral actions, wrong things, moral compromises, it starts out, you can make an excuse and say, well, it's okay, it won't do any harm, no one really minds. And then it gets worse and worse, and you become more and more dependent on it. It gets bigger and bigger. It's a bit, again, like drug taking. Well, it's my business, it doesn't matter, no one's done any harm, there's no harm in it. And then you do it more and more. And then suddenly you find you're dependent on it, and it creates a whole lot of other problems. So it might cause you to lose your job, to lose your marriage, to lose your home. And then you have to take more of it just to be able to get through the day. And I think that's what happens with mass immigration, because we rely on it in order to keep GDP up. And I think that it's a very crude calculation here. It's really basic. GDP needs to be kept up, or it needs to be rising, in order for the government to continue to be able to borrow. The British state relies upon borrowing. The welfare state will collapse without borrowing. If GDP goes down, the UK effectively goes into permanent recession, which I think in real terms it is. It is in permanent recession. If it's obvious that becomes obvious that the UK is in permanent recession, lenders will start yanking their loans. And then they'll start saying, actually, we want to double the interest rate if we are going to lend money to you to compensate for the risk. And government won't be able to manage public services, won't be able to run the welfare state. And that's what we vote for. And they know it. So it's really crude. They have no incentive to care. They do not care about your standard of living, how well off they are. What they care about is the overall gross zero-sum figure of GDP. Is the GDP figure stable or rising? As long as they can do that, they can carry on borrowing, the debt keeps getting serviced, and they can keep the welfare state going a bit longer. If that stops, the welfare state starts to crumble. We will go nuts at that. We will not tolerate that. It will be disaster, catastrophe, the sky falling on our heads, and then they will get defenestrated. So they have to keep, really crudely, they have to keep GDP at its level or rising. They've got to keep that. They've got to keep the GDP figure up. And immigration is a kind of sugar hit that serves that, because what you do is you effectively, you don't have to go through the process that we've traditionally had to go through of giving birth to and raising and educating and training a human being. So you don't have to go through the business of a couple finding each other. That takes time, that takes effort, that takes resources, and then family formation, and then negotiating the destructive injustices of feminism, and then conceiving the baby, giving birth to the baby, looking after the baby, bringing it up, then feeding and clothing and cleaning, and then educating this child, and then perhaps the child getting trained into some kind of job and getting experience in a job before it goes abroad. all you do, if you bring in someone to do a job, you just get them coming straight into the economy at no expense. All of that expense has been borne by the other country, but by India, and you just get someone who fits into the economy and is working on a job in general, if they're on a work visa, and that gives an instant hit to the economy without any expense, especially if you can say that person then can't claim any form of welfare, has no recourse to public funds. So, but the problem with that sugar hit is, firstly, it wears off. After they've been here 5 or 10 years, they then can claim welfare, and a lot of them find they will. They'll bring in a lot of relatives from poor countries because it's nicer over here, it's richer over here, it's not so violent and dirty as it is over there. So they'll bring a lot of relatives in who certainly are welfare dependent, and then and so that sugar hit, it wears off fast. It creates more problems afterwards. But secondly, you have to do it again the next year, because it just gives you the hit for that year. People come into the economy, GDP goes up, and then if you don't repeat it the next year, GDP will start going down again. So you have to keep doing it. It's like a drug, and the government is addicted to it. Okay, bear with me. And that is a problem for the government, particularly for this Labour government, because the British GDP and government finances are like a balloon that's being squeezed at both ends and also in the middle. It's just, it can't grow. There's no way to make it grow naturally. It's not. It is shrinking. It is deflating naturally. And so I want to go through, this is nerdy stuff, but it proves the point. And the point it proves is that the UK economy is naturally shrinking. The government cannot allow that to happen. So it's going to have to keep printing, what I call printing people, bringing people in, workers in, and printing passports for them. And so I want to go through a few of the stories here. So if I go to this next one, hold on. Now that is, bear with me just a second. Hold on. This is about the government's debt doom loop, what's been called the doom loop. So they have to borrow more. The more they borrow, the more wary lenders become, the more interest they charge, and so the more they have to borrow to cover the interest. So that's public finances up to March 2025, and where, yes, borrowing in the financial, let me just highlight that paragraph, borrowing in the financial year ending March 2025 was provisionally estimated at 152 billion. This was 20.7 billion more than the same 12-month period a year earlier, and 14.6 billion more than the amount forecast by the Office for Budget Responsibility. Actually, a year before, so March 2024, I think the figure was 80-something billion. That's what they forecast. And it came in at 151, almost double what they forecast it to be a year ago. So a year ago they said, don't worry, it's going to come down next year. And it hasn't. It's gone up. It's 20 billion higher. 20 billion is a lot of money. And so that means the government just doesn't have spare money to spend on things that it wants to spend on. And this is the first thing. Think of this as one end of the balloon, that the government doesn't have enough money coming in. It can't get enough money coming in. And this financial doom loop, this is getting picked up by journalists. This is one from the Telegraph, reported in Yahoo. The UK is headed for a full-blown financial crash and nothing can stop it now. So it talks about the increasing debt figures, and it also talks about, meanwhile, in a stagnant economy, corporation tax revenues have proved disappointing as companies struggle to make any money. VAT is no longer raising the amount expected as struggling households rein back their spending. Even worse, these are only the provisional figures. If anyone feels like a bet, here is a certain winner. When the final numbers are tallied up, they will be far worse. And what this guy is saying is that the real annual deficit may be as high as 6%, not the 5.3% that the government or the official figures are currently saying. And that gets worse when you think about debt interest. So everything is pointing to less money being available. And one of the problems is debt interest, which keeps going up. As shown below, in 2024, this is from the Office for Budget Responsibility. In 24 to 25, we expect debt interest spending to total 105 billion. That would represent 8.2% of total public spending. My understanding, that's the third biggest expense that the government faces, and is equivalent to over 3.7% of national income, GDP. So that is only going one way, that number, and that's going. And the higher it goes, the higher it will go. I think this is reflected in some of the decisions that the government are making. I think this was one that I thought was significant from last year, where the government is changing its definition of debt. So the Chancellor's to change debt rules to release billions. I think they went for the higher figure that was said might have released or up to £50 billion. I don't know if that's 50 billion. The wider debt measure is expected to allow for up to 50 billion more borrowing to invest in big building projects such as roads. And what they're doing is basically classifying things that as assets that they didn't previously classify as assets. So they can say, but the borrowing we've taken on, that is offset by these assets that we have. One is student loans. And so I would not invest in student loans, because I think a lot of them I think they're not reliable. You get some kind of economic crisis, they just won't get repaid. But the government has categorised those as an asset that they can borrow against. And so that doesn't then count as debt, so it doesn't go on the debt numbers. So they're fiddling the numbers. What this reminds me of is East Germany before the Berlin Wall fell. It was kept alive by arresting dissidents and then selling them to West Germany. And it made, I think it was 55 billion Deutschmarks, which was one hell of a lot of money then for them. And that was an economy that was falling apart. And I think redefining debt like that, that's a sign of an economy falling apart, where you basically say, we can borrow, we can create money based on backed by some kind of security, which actually isn't liquid enough to act as security. What they're also talking about is things like roads or bridges. I don't know if that's really going to happen. Roads or bridges acting as assets that can be valued. The problem with a road is you can't make any income off it. It might cost money to build, but it's not something anyone will buy off you, because you can't do anything. You can't make any money out of it. So I think what surprised me is the financial markets war. It didn't get more publicity than it did, because I think that's a sign of an economy cracking up when it's trying to just fill the books to pretend that debt is no longer debt so that it can borrow more. That's a dreadful sign. So that's one end of the balloon, just not enough money coming in. They can't pay their way. The other end of the balloon is too much urgent demand for big spending now. What has happened since the financial crisis? There have been restrictions on public spending, and now wherever the government looks, different departments are saying there's a crisis. We have to have a lot of money now. And I want to go through some of the demands that are being made. So if I go this one. First one, crime. Crime spiralling out of control in stores, warns British Retail Consortium. That's the Guardian. Basically, what they're saying, the British Retail Consortium did a survey of shop workers and shop owners to say how much shoplifting is there, because you can't get accurate figures from the police, because shops don't call the police anymore, because the police have been cut. Police can't don't turn out for shoplifting, so there's no point calling the police, and they don't. And what they found is that the trade body's report, based on a sample from retailers representing more than 1.1 million employees, found theft had reached an all-time high with more than 20 million incidents during the year, 25% more than the year before. So it's going up fast, and that's because criminals know when the police aren't coming. So it's profit without risk. to a criminal. It said this had cost the retailers 2.2 billion, with many more incidents linked to organised crime gangs systematically targeting stores across the country. So what that comes down to is there is an urgent demand for more police. The police are saying we got to have more people. We can't police rising crime properly. And I think they're right, but I don't know where the money's going to come from. So another one is the courts. You need courts, you need the justice system, otherwise society, it will fall apart. No one goes to court, so you get crime will mushroom. So record court backlog as victims wait years for justice. And the carry home number here is that some 73,000 trials, that's a lot of trials, were unheard at the end of September in 2024, around twice the figure in 2019. So that figure has doubled in 5 years. In some cases, victims reporting serious crimes such as rape won't see suspects tried for 4 years. And so the figures come as ministers announce a major courts review which could lead to the end of jury trials for many crimes. Again, Starmer, he was a passionate advocate of jury trials. And so, again, not sincere. What I think this means is that if they don't put more money in, you get another doom loop where lawyers say to their criminal clients, don't plead guilty, push this out to trial, because it'll probably never get to trial because they haven't got the money to put you on trial. And so people who would otherwise plead guilty and been dealt with put more pressure on the court system by pleading not guilty. So I think they're going to have to put more money into the courts, but where's it going to come from? They haven't got it. Then you have this one. This is prisons. Again, we need prisons. You've seen what's happened with prisons. They're letting people out in order to make more space. This is from the Parliamentary Audit Committee, I think. Prisons crisis as justice system faces total gridlock in 2026. Total gridlock doesn't sound good. So, and Parliament calls for rapid action. That means put more money fast, send money quick. So, overcrowding forces UK prisons to be focused on averting disaster instead of rehabilitation. And then the report finds a system in crisis with the safety and security of prisoners at risk, and HM Prison and Probation Services' ability to rehabilitate offenders hampered. The adult male prison population at as high as 99.7% occupancy between October 22 and August 94 is alarmingly full. So that's prison overcrowding. They've got to find more money. Otherwise, you just say to people, well, we can't afford to imprison you, so you get away with it. And that news spreads like wildfire among criminals. Particularly if you say, we're now going to downgrade this type of offence and decategorise it as a serious offence, people who are in the market, criminals, will get wind of that very, very fast. It's the profit and loss ratio for them. And the next one is local authorities. Almost half England's councils could face bankruptcy over 4.6 billion deficit. So half there, well, it's in fact 43%, and that's by March 2026 that they're anticipating that 43% of councils could go bankrupt. This is characteristic of the British state. You have the official debt figure, but then all the different government bodies, universities, health trusts, local authorities, they're all stuffed with debt as well. So the real debt figure, the official debt figure, is not the real debt figure. Almost half of councils in England risk falling into bankruptcy without action to address the 4.6 billion deficit amassed under a Conservative era policy, the government spending watchdog has warned. So if you have half that number, a quarter of that number going bust, if 10% go broke, that's a big problem. The government is going to have to bail them out because it can't operate without local authorities in place. Otherwise, the central government just has to take over, and it'll probably get even more expensive. And finally, military spending, defence. Increasing defence spending will mean government breaking promises. Bringing up defence spending to 2.5% of GDP would amount to an extra 5 to 6 billion in cash terms, a figure that could easily eat up most of the Chancellor's financial headroom. I think the figure was going to be what the Chiefs of Staff had asked for. I think was 3 or 3.5%. It was more, and that would have required more than double the 5 to 6 billion that's being called for there. But we haven't got the money to do it. Where's that money going to come from? The forces are saying that without that money, they won't be able to defend the country properly. They won't be able to operate properly. I think they're probably right. Now, just going through those reports, it's tedious stuff. The point is, that's the other end of the balloon. All these urgent demands for big sums of money, 5 to 6 billion just for the army, 4.6 billion for local authorities. Money the government doesn't have. Where's that money going to come from? The least it must do is maintain its ability to borrow. And in order to do that, it needs to keep GDP up. If GDP starts falling, Britain goes into permanent recession. And then lenders won't lend, and they'll jack up the interest rate. And the problem is, whichever direction the government looks in, there are demands for more money. So what the government wants is growth. Governments always say this. They say we're going to increase spending, not by taxing people more by increasing growth. And there's a kind of mantra, a cliche that says, don't worry about the deficit, just worry about growing the economy, and then borrowing will take care of itself. Because if you grow the economy, people will be happy to lend to you, interest rates will go down. But crucially, what it means is, if you get a spurt of economic growth, what you get is people earning more, and that means you get more people going into higher rate tax brackets. So you get a higher percentage of a bigger amount, which means that your tax rate really goes up. So government wants to grow, and this is what the Labour Party, its strapline at the last election was growth, growth, growth. And here it is, mission-driven government. Yeah, everything is a mission. Mission this, mission that. Okay. And of course, the first one is to kickstart economic growth. They want to secure the highest sustained growth in the G7, blah-de-blah-de-blah-de. If they can, so they're going to have to go for growth. The problem is they can't do it, and that is the middle of the balloon. I've done one end is not enough money coming in, the other end is too much demand for money, so too much money going out, and in the middle is just the economy getting squeezed. They cannot grow the economy. So think of the UK or UK GDP, government spending like this balloon, squeezed at both ends and in the middle. And this is the bit in the middle that I'm going on about here. Now, and the reason I say that the UK economy is in real terms in permanent recession is because GDP per head is in long-term decline. It's not going up. And I want to start by, if I show you this little graph from the World Bank, what that shows, that line there, that's a fault with the graph, it's not 1.5, I think that's a zero line. So what you see is, that is since 81. You see the trend line is going down and down and down. And what you had, that's the financial crash where this is GDP per capita growth. In the UK, so GDP per head. During the financial crisis, it went down, it fell by 5.3%. Then it went up, but not quite so high, so it grew by 1.4%. And then during the pandemic, it went down by, I don't know what the number is there, it doesn't give I can't hold on, 10.6%. And then it went back up again, but again, not so high. It went back by 8.7%. So again, it's a downward line overall. And today, it sits at 0.5%. So GDP per capita is shrinking. It is going down every year. And that's according to the World Bank. Now, this matters because if GDP per capita is going, I know some people out there won't understand the idea of per capita, but you will. And if GDP per capita is going down, then the only way you can maintain GDP is by increasing the number of people, the number of per capita. So you can to plug that gap, and that's why I think immigration is likely to go. Or one reason why I think it's likely to go up. And I want to show you this little graph. It's from it's not an official body, it's just an economics explainer website called Economics Help. I'm not aware it has any political affiliation. I suspect it might be a little bit liberal, lefty, middle of the road, but I don't know. What it's showing is UK GDP per capita. If you can see that, it's up until 2008. That was the trend line. After 2008, it's flattened out. Then you had the pandemic, and then after the pandemic, it started going down again. So that's GDP per head. That is going down. If GDP per head goes down and the number of people in the country doesn't grow, then your GDP goes down. And then lenders start yanking their loans. And then the government it collapses. It can't pay for welfare. We go nuts and we throw them out of the window. And they don't want that. So they can't permit that. It's probably worse than that though, because those figures there are based on ONS, Office for National Statistics. I don't know if you can see that ONS there. All those figures are based on ONS. And ONS figures, they are, I get the impression that most people see them as unreliable today. So if I go to this next one, this is the Resolution Foundation. They produce a report where they say they're no longer relying on the ONS figures. They think ONS figures are bad, and they exaggerate the amount of growth of GDP per capita. So headline productivity estimates for the UK based on the ONS's much maligned labour force survey are unreliable. An alternative estimate based on the revenues, payroll and tax data, and that apparently is generally accepted as being more reliable, suggests GDP per hour has fallen by 0.5% between 2019 and 2024. So it hasn't grown at all in the last 5 years. It has gone down by 0.5%. That's not much, but that's enough for it to say that the real figure, the GDP, British GDP, is in permanent recession. It's not growing, it's shrinking, and over the long term. Prior to the pandemic, this would be the second biggest 5-year collapse in output per hour since comparable data began in the 1970s, beaten only by the financial crisis period. And Britain's issues are broad-based. Since 2019, productivity has fallen in 13 sectors that account for nearly 2/3 of UK output. So that's a bad sign. So real data is probably worse. There's probably worse news coming. And if that filters through, what are lenders to the UK going to say? What does the government do about that? It just needs to force feed growth all it can. And the problem is, that's not what the government's doing. So what you have here is, there you are, there's Rachel Reeves looking nice, looking very, she's thinking about productivity there. And staff layoffs in the UK gain pace amid Trump tariff turmoil and labour cost increase. So part of it's Trump's tariffs, the other part is labour cost increase. The drop in confidence level, higher national insurance contributions and the rise in the national living wage, that's what this government has done, which both came into effect in April, and the uncertainty created by the US president's import duties were blamed by employers for ending signs of optimism earlier in the year. So basically, their employment freezes. They're not taking on new people, laying off people. The drop in confidence levels was matched by the fall to a record low outside the pandemic in the number of UK employers expecting to increase headcount in the next 3 years. So these are record low figures. A separate survey of small and medium businesses by the business advisory firm BDO revealed a similar picture. So that doesn't bode well for growth. So all of this is pointing to one thing. It's pointing to printing money and printing people. I'll come to that in a minute. What the government is hoping to do, the one thing they're relying on, is building more houses, and I think they think that's going to get the economy moving again. It won't. And there was this quite a well-publicised interview between Angela Rayner and Trevor Phillips, where he basically said, you want to build 1.5 million houses that will house 3.4 million people, but you have said in that period they're going to be 2.5 million immigrants coming in. So you're not going to really going to ease the housing situation for anyone. I don't think the government's house building plans are designed to ease the housing shortage. I don't think they're designed to make housing more affordable, because that would entail reducing house prices. If house prices start to go down, people go into negative equity. There's so much borrowed so much money borrowed against houses that if house prices go down, people have to sell their houses because they can't pay the mortgage, and then you get into a property crash. People start selling, house prices go down further, more people have to sell. The government can't reduce house prices because it has pumped up a debt bubble by trying to pump up the economy, forcing money into the economy. A lot of that money has gone into housing, and now houses are buoyed up by debt. And if housing becomes cheaper, you get a banking crisis, and that they can't do that. So don't believe a word they say when they say they're going to make housing more affordable. They're not. What this is really about is them saying nothing's growing in this country. We just want to force feed the housing sector. We want to push that to make sure we concrete over the countryside, and just because that'll create some business activity, and then people who go into these houses will order new fridges and freezers and washing machines, and then that will create economic activity. I think that's the idea, but I don't think they're going to be able to do that. I don't think it's going to work even on that cynical but realistic analysis. Partly for this reason, the UK doesn't have enough builders for Labour's 1.5 million homes. I think that means they'll just, if they find they don't have enough builders, they'll import them, they'll print them from abroad. So the UK does not have enough construction workers to build 1.5 million homes. The government has promised, industry leaders have warned. Okay, so I don't think it's going to happen. And the evidence for that, there is evidence for that new homes fall again in the government's first 6 months. So up to January of this year, new builds, the numbers fell. I don't think they're going to be able to reverse that trend. If they do, it's going to have to be by importing more people, which makes the housing crisis worse. And I just don't see it having a major effect on overall GDP. I think what it will have an effect on is by ruining the countryside, creating really low-grade, substandard properties built fast that don't comply with building regs, where the gables fall off in the first storm. Really, really bad. I think the pinnacle of modern new build rubbish. I think that's what we're going to get. But I don't think it's not going to save the economy. So again, so what you have is that balloon, squeeze one end, the other end, and in the middle. What that means, if that's what the economy is like, what this all points to is printing money and printing people. The two go hand in hand. They're a very similar drug, a very similar type of a kind of methamphetamine. So printing money, that's effectively forms of quantitative easing. It either takes two forms, neither of them is good. The first one is where the central bank prints up money and then it is lent into the economy. So they make it available. They go to big banks and say, borrow this money from us at a cheap rate of interest, and then you can lend it to businesses and to rich people at a cheap rate of interest, and they will go and invest it in capital assets, shares, bonds, property, patents, things like that, so that asset values increase. The problem with that is it dilutes the money in your pocket, and it transfers that value, that wealth, into the pockets of people who are already rich, because they're the ones who can borrow, and it increases the value of their assets. It is the rich who own assets, and that impoverishes the poor, as happened with QE after 2008. That's why one of the reasons why everyone feels poorer, because rents have skyrocketed. Capital assets in particular, university education, hospital or healthcare if you have to pay for it, or insurances. These are capital assets. They go up and up in price because capital values go up when you print and lend money into the economy. It creates more demand for capital assets. It doesn't really increase economic activity that much, except that the very rich feel they've got a bit more money to splash about temporarily, but then the debt overhang, it then suppresses activity. It's not good for the economy. It creates a lot of hardship and inequality for ordinary people, and it's very unpopular. Ordinary people feel and understand. Most of us might not analyse it, but most of us feel that it has that effect. It creates inequality. It is unjust. It's very unpopular. Would Keir Starmer do it? He might, but it would cost him a lot of unpopularity. I don't think he'd be able to get away with doing just that. The other way with printing and spending, with printing money, is to print and spend it. So you print it, you give it to government, government just spends it, sprays it into the economy, a bit like it did during the pandemic with stimulus checks or furlough checks. And that proves inflationary, as it did after the pandemic. Inflation went up fast and quite a long way to about, I think, 9.5%. It went up, it basically zoomed up for a short period because of all that money that was printed and spent into the economy. I don't think Starmer's government is likely to do that. I think that's the sort of thing Farage will do. Bold action, radical action for the benefit of the British people, QE for the people. I think he will do that, and then we go into inflation. And so, but neither of those is really attractive, printing money. That's not, I don't think that's one they want to do. The other one is printing people. And so importing people from abroad, printing the paperwork for them, making them citizens, and then plugging them into the economy. And that, as I say, that's like a drug. People go straight onto the payroll. You don't have to raise them, give birth to them, educate them, train them. They just come in and they do the job that you've imported them for. And European workers are the best for that because they tend to be higher IQ, better educated, more productive, and they tend not to bring their relatives from other rich countries around Europe, so France, Germany, the Netherlands or Ireland. Their relatives will say, oh, no, I'm happy staying here, it's just as wealthy here. Whereas people who come from third world countries, foreigners from third world countries, they're going to bring whole families with them because it's richer here, it's more orderly here, it's much cleaner and nicer here. So so it has a really long-term negative effect, but it gives that short-term boost, and you have to repeat it year after year. But otherwise, you go back into you just put off the evil day where you're in decline, and so you have to keep upping the immigration figure to make it worse, to make it work. It is like a drug. It's like methamphetamine. You have to increase the dose to get the same hit. I still think they're going to do that. The reason I think they'll do that is because the alternative is unthinkable. The alternative would be to say, no, we are not going to allow more immigration. We've had quite enough. It's done us nothing but harm. If that means we have to go into recession, we'll go into recession. If that then means that lenders no longer want to lend to us, they don't have to lend to us. If them lending to us means that we can't afford to pay out welfare, we have to cut social security, cut housing benefit, cut social housing, we have to close a couple of hospitals, then we'll do that. If they do that, then we will panic, we'll lose our minds, and we will get them out. We'll get them out in nothing flat and get in a government that promises that it will put things right and keep the welfare state going again, even at the expense of a lot more immigration. We will go along with that. It is unthinkable. They cannot stop funding the welfare state because that is what we vote for, and we won't just vote them out. I think we'll get very violent if the welfare state starts to stop paying out. And it's more than that. It is, incidentally, it's what politicians want to do. Politicians like mass immigration as a class, as we've seen right across Tories and Labour and Lib Dems. They have all been in collusion. They love mass immigration because it increases their power over us by making us more powerless, by grinding us down, making us poorer, making us less trustworthy towards each other, making us more dependent. And the way I've heard it said is that people who are used to turning to the government are less likely to turn on the government. And so it just makes life as a politician much better, gives them much more power and much more influence over our lives, which they like. It's about the will to power. So it's what they want to do, but I don't think they're going to have any choice for economic reasons. So I think that is what the government is going to do. I think it is not going to increase immigration by much. What it's going to do is to try to make it more profitable by controlling who comes in for qualifications and supposedly their ability to work. I don't think they'll be able to do that very well at all. And by reducing their ability to, charging them more when they come to study, and reducing their ability to claim welfare, perhaps reducing their ability to bring in dependents. That would be a small improvement. Query that though, because I think Starmer loves that family reunification human right. So I'm not sure they're going to restrict dependent relatives coming in all that much. And the sad thing, I think, is that we are going to let them. They know that we will let them do this. We're going to let them get away with it. And that is because whilst politicians are addicted to power, we are addicted to welfare and state management of the economy, state management of our jobs and finances, but particularly to the welfare state intervening in basically underwriting and bankrolling and guaranteeing every adult financial aspect of our lives. And just to show you this YouGov chart here, general election 2024, what are the most important issues? And if you go down, if you can see that cost of living, most important one, that was, so which of the following will be the most important issues in deciding who you will vote for? 45% say cost of living, 34% say health, 32% say the economy in general, 26% say immigration and asylum. So we are much more concerned about the economy and the welfare state than we are about immigration. The politicians know, and this is our moral failing. I might do a video about this, but we have made moral compromises. But by basically over the last century saying that it is okay to extort money out of other people to pay for things we want, which is what the tax and spend system does. That is a moral compromise, and it seems perfectly harmless. It seemed perfectly harmless 100 years ago or after World War II, but gradually it increases until it makes all kinds of other problems, and you can't dismount from the tiger. And again, and the politicians are aware of this. They're aware that we will put up with it. They are aware that if immigration continues to go up, we will complain about it, but we will let it happen. And what I think that means is that immigration is going to keep going up. I don't think the government intend to cut it by very much. I don't think they have any choice about the matter for economic reasons anyway. And I think really this issue is not going to get solved by us, the voters. We're not going to vote our way out of this. We are going to collapse our way out of this. Thank you.